The Deep Dive podcast is powered by Atla.im and brings you real stories from the Isle of Man's business community. Hosted by the Atla Group, we explore the journeys of entrepreneurs, business leaders, experts, government representatives, and our own team.
Hello humans, welcome to the Deep Dive podcast, brought to you by Martin, that's me,
and Lyle Krauser,
that's him. Podcast powered by Atla.im, so thank you for their support. We're joined by Jess. Jess, welcome.
Thanks so much.
We're going to talk marketing. Lyle's here to help me and guide me as well, being a somewhat skilled expert in that area from my experience here. So perhaps for our listeners, a bit of background to yourself, how you got into the space and ended up on the beautiful Isle of Man.
Awesome. Yeah. So I actually, this morning, before I came here, I thought, how long have I actually been in it? So I actually started when I was 18. So it's been 16 years, and I've given away my age. But I started below the line marketing. So actually, I started by training promoters to go into store and to do like activations and sell products. And it's probably one of my favorite jobs that I've ever done. And it was because you really got to learn a little bit more about how people interact with brands like firsthand. So you're actually talking to consumers and talking to people. So I started my career there. I was supposed to be a journalist. So I went to university to study journalism, but I fell a little bit out of love with it because in South Africa, it's quite politically driven and I just wanted to have fun and write. So ended up in marketing, worked in a bit of like below the line, then digital marketing. And then I met my then boyfriend who told me he was moving to the Isle of Man. Didn't know much about it or anything at all. And after a year of doing long distance, I decided to make the leap and sort of arrived here, which was going on 11 years now. So I'm a little bit Manx, I think, just a little bit.
And that transformation then into you call it below the line.
Yeah.
Not knowing what is above the line now. I assume you're above the line now.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
So below the line is more things like promotion. So it's not really big in the UK. Well, I don't know, maybe Lyle, you can comment on that as well. But back home, like a really big thing is having activations in store. So you would go into Tesco per se, and you would pick up an ice cream, like an Ola Magnum ice cream. And there would be someone there who is either giving you like a free gift or telling you about the product or saying, do you want to enter and you can win a prize? So there's a lot of interaction, like face to face, or you'd go into a bottle store and they're doing tastings of wine and whiskey. So what's great about that is you're actually getting that interaction with consumers and you're understanding like exactly, you can tell people how to interact with the brand. So, have your whiskey like this, put 2 ice cubes, don't do that. So what it really is a personal way of marketing. What we do now is very like mass. You're not really, from social media, digital marketing, everything that you're doing is now at a much bigger scale. So it was really nice to start where I started, and now I've obviously transitioned to where we are. But the principles I used then 18 years ago still apply to what we do today. So it's marketing after all, it's comms.
Yeah, and it's just, I suppose the below the line piece would be your at the point of purchase.
Yeah.
So on the Isle of Man, there's not, we have a few retailers, but it's not big like in the UK or in SA. And then your above the line would be your kind of radio, TV, or your mass audience marketing. Don't quote me.
And the business itself, talk us through that development of funding.
Yeah, so we came over, didn't immediately start the business. So Nick was in gaming, Nick's my husband and my business partner. So he was in gaming for about 10 years and he was a developer. And then after hours, he was developing websites for me. And I was consulting to different agencies, mainly doing digital marketing. And then we sort of sat back one day and said, well, we've got complementary skills. We, me on the creative marketing side and Nick on the sort of technical side. And we're doing it for fun, which at the time it was fun because it was after hours and it was what was making us a bit of extra money. And then it was like, hey, we could potentially make a business out of it. And we both have sort of that entrepreneurial spirit. And I grew up in a household where my parents had their own business. So we dived in, and so that was 2019. So in January, it'll be 6 years. And really the idea was to start a design and development agency on the island, and we saw a huge opportunity, but it's really evolved since then.
Let's get really personal. Start with relationship with running a business with a partner. How's that?
I actually spoke to Nick about this last night, and the only way I can really honestly describe it is I think the good times are really great and really high because you are celebrating with the person that obviously means the most to you in the world. So when you have the success, it's really great to share it. But then I think the flip side is when it's bad, it's really difficult because there's no distinction between work life and home life. But I think where Nick and I work really well is we're completely two different people. So Nick is phenomenal when it comes to things like operations and numbers. He is really practical, and I'm a bit more free spirited. I'm the one that probably sees the cup like half full. He sees it half empty. And that balance has worked really well because where I go off the ledge, he kind of pulls me back and says, hold on. But we've had to learn and to be very open and honest, it's been a roller coaster because we've also had to learn to re-communicate, to realign our objectives. And then we've had a child since we started. And that's now taught us a whole new way of doing business and what's important. So it's not easy, but it is great. And he's phenomenal. And I'm really lucky to have him as a business partner, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone.
No. I know you're involved in the startup grind. Perhaps just a bit of background to that, because you're obviously talking entrepreneurs out.
Yeah.
I know that setup with that support term is totally directed in that area.
Yeah. So when we started Afundi, we obviously Nick jumped from the corporate world and we sort of jumped into the startup world, and we were looking around and we were trying to have conversations with people and say, what do we do from an accountancy point of view? What do we do from, where do we go for coaching? And there were all these questions that startups have, and we just didn't know where to funnel them or where to pose them. And then I knew, obviously, Alex Wilson and Katie Nicholson, who were involved in Startup Grind, and we started going to their events. And it was phenomenal because we were sitting next to like-minded people, some who were seasoned investors who had been there and gone through the ringer and who could give us advice, and other people who were in it and we could kind of compare battle scars or say, hey, I've used this person, you should use that person. And so Startup Grind essentially is this massive community around the world where it's supporting the whole ecosystem of a startup business. So they connect people who are starting their business with people looking to make investment, and they help across the board from networking to software to partnerships with really great businesses and established businesses to kind of forge that gap between the startup and an established business. So we started going to the events, and then I think a year or two ago, Katie and Alex were looking to bring new people in as committee members, and I jumped at the opportunity because I felt that it was almost my duty to give back. And our goal is just to open the conversation here and to have really meaningful events that allow people to have a safe space to say, hey, I want to share my journey, and maybe that journey will resonate with someone else. So again, I think not a lot happens for the startup community. A lot of networking is very much based around established businesses. So we're trying to fill that gap.
We speak to a number of entrepreneurs in different parts of the world, and it'd be interesting to get your views on entrepreneurship in Isle of Man, what its USP is, what you think, where you think the opportunities might lie, and maybe what some of the challenges are as well.
Yeah, the Isle of Man for me it's an incredible place to do business because of accessibility. So I think that's one thing that you cannot put a price on, that is the fact that you can literally probably walk into the bank manager having a coffee or walk into the government building and have a meaningful conversation. I think you would never get that in any other jurisdiction, in my opinion. So there is also this really strong, I think, sense of collaboration and community. So people are really keen to see other people do well. And so I think people dip in and say, hey, I can help with that, or I know someone who can help with that. So there's this open communication that allows people to really come together and help. Certainly for us, up until recently, our entire business has been built on referrals. So every single piece of work that's come in has been because it's just come from someone else, and it's all been inbound. We haven't really spent much money or time on our own marketing, which is horrific. Sitting here as someone who's supposed to be a specialist at it. But I think the challenges, though, is that it can be a really small pool. So I see in our game, particularly, there's a lot of people that like pop up overnight, and, you're competing for a small amount of business if you're looking locally. And I think, like anything, there's a lot of changes that are coming in that people don't really know how to embrace, whether it be AI, legislation. It's difficult, and I don't think we're the quickest to adapt. And that's something that I think every business is trying to wrap their head around, is like, how do we stay with the times and how do we adapt quickly?
Before we maybe dig into or deep dive into marketing a bit more, we've got a yes/no quiz. Apologies, I'm a bit of a cold. But you've been here a while now, so it's actually yes, sir.
Oh, no, I
nay
can't.
boy.
Okay.
So we need the accent as well.
I literally can't, and I don't want to offend anyone because I respect Manx people immensely.
But you can say yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So
I'll try.
yes, no answers.
Okay.
To 5 or 6 quick fire, so that's okay. And then we'll dig in. So, do you believe that a strong brand can significantly impact a company's success?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Is it possible for a brand to recover from a major public relations crisis?
Yes, sir.
It's a bit of mantra there.
I'm trying.
Not horrendous. Do you think that emotional connection is more important than product quality in building a brand loyalty?
No.
Neighbor.
Same.
Can a company succeed without digital marketing strategy in today's market?
No.
Neighbor.
No, boy.
Breaks the Manxness, Jeff.
I'm trying.
Is consistency in branding more important than innovation?
Yes, no. Okay, yeah. That's a tough one. But
Yes, no, but yeah. The essence of the course.
yes. Ish. Yes, sir. Ish.
Not yes, sir. Sounds
Yeah,
like it, yes, sir.
yeah.
Not like. Do you believe that social media presence is essential for all types of businesses?
No. No, boy.
We could start this whole thing again. Is it necessary for brands to take a stand on social and political issues?
No, boy. No.
It's an insight, a little insight into your thinking. So let's
Tough questions there, though, because everything has a consequence. So
yeah, context to each situation, but that's why we asked them. So thank you. So marketing branding, maybe we'll just start a little bit in the kind of 101 side of where I guess you maybe either through experiences or not, you've gone to businesses and where it can be perceived where people see value in brand and marketing. So perhaps to break it down, I assume there's 2 aspects. And again, you're the pros here. There's marketing and branding. So we look at the branding side of things and the importance of that, and just through your evolution in this space, what I'm not when I had to do a sales pitch, why is brand so important?
yeah, I actually think there's a big misconception about how important a brand is outside of the 4 walls. So when we look at a brand, it's not just customer facing, it's a brand that makes up just about everything in a business. So one of the things that I think is so important is that no one owns a brand. So normally when I go in and I speak to a client, I say, the brand sits in the middle of the table and none of us own it. We don't, you don't, you may own the company, but you don't own that brand. The brand actually belongs to your customers. And so I think for me, it's about identifying what you want to say to your customers, who you want to be, and then living that brand. And it's living it from every single touch point, from when people walk through the door to how people answer the phone, to how people talk about your company, how people perceive your company when you're at events. So it's every single touch point. And I think the misconception is that people think a brand is like a logo or just a website or a flyer that you've designed. But actually, if you're building a brand, you're essentially building, I hate the word, but like a cult, like everything around it.
Culture.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And I think the difficult we face as like a design and development agency is knowing how much impact we can have, because we can only take it so far, but we don't sit in a client's office and we don't, we're not the guardians of it internally. And so we try and build a brand in collaboration with our clients, give it to them and say, please nurture this and please look after it and make people love it. And that goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, is below the line marketing, having like promoters in a shop actually talking and saying, this is an amazing ice cream and this is an amazing product and you should taste it. You should be building that like with your team, that people go out and they talk about your business. And so I think branding is like, those are the fundamentals. The marketing bit kind of sits on top of that. So once you've got a good brand, then you can market yourself. You can't market yourself and hope that your brand will follow. So it's almost like branding comes first, then marketing. And marketing really is just the delivery of the brand in my mind.
Is the challenges of that on the Isle of Man, do you think? Just from a small community, and maybe, I mean, you mentioned about referrals there, where maybe brand isn't that important, per se. Obviously, you're getting referrals based off your delivery, not necessarily the brand, albeit I suppose ultimately saying they are interlinked, because the delivery of your service is what your brand is.
Exactly. And I think one of the issues we have is how people value the brand in terms of where it sits in a business. So I hate when I hear that branding or marketing or anything to do with our game is an operational cost. So for me, it's a business development and sales exercise, but it's also then dovetails into the culture bit, and it dovetails into recruitment and HR, and it dovetails into, you know, just about everything. It dovetails into your office, like your facilities. It sits across the board. And when people just see it as, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of money, I'm going to do the bare minimum, and then that's me. It's like a tick box. People then don't value it and therefore don't see how it can be used to actually get new business, recruit new staff, you know, build culture. And what we face is we go in there, and the most common thing I hear is, I know we need to redo our brand. And I say, okay, why? And they're like, well, we know. And so I think it's more that people just think they have to do it, but they don't know why they do it. And I don't know if you've done the exercise with like the Steve Jobs, the what, how, and why is, and you don't market on the what you do or how you do it. You market on the why you do it. And 9 times out of 10, people don't know how to answer that. Like, why do you do what you do? What is your vision? Like, yes, you're an accountancy firm, or you sell, clothing, but why do you do that? And that's what a brand and a marketing strategy and all of that's built on. So we have a huge challenge on our hands, because I just don't think people value it as much as they should. But there's also a reason that Coca-Cola still has the marketing budget that they have, despite having global dominance. So you're still going to spend money on marketing, even if you are the market leaders. I mean, Apple's marketing budget is huge.
As you say, it's a promise externally, but it's also promise internally. And so your brand represents the kind of the promise to your team, to your staff, to your clients, to all your stakeholders. And I think we've probably seen that at Atla, where the brand that's been created is leading some of the change, and it's probably more representative of the culture that's been created within our walls.
So in your space, would you can obviously talk about that with clients, and maybe they all embrace it, I don't know. But would you see a future where you have parts of your business that go in and help businesses with the culture to tie it into the brand? Or do you do that already?
We seem to kind of not intentionally do that, but we end up in that space because really, like as an agency, we essentially do design development, but design of what? Like so many different things, development of, websites, custom software. But then what we end up doing is we know that all of that needs support in the form of like marketing. And what we end up doing is being dragged in the nicest possible way, where people are saying, well, actually, you're designing this, but we need to design internal comms. So what does that look like? And then you're saying, okay, well, if your brand voice is this externally, what is it internally? So we end up doing it. I'd love to be in a space where we can partner probably with someone who specializes in that area, because I'm certainly no authority on culture, but I think that it's going to end up where the most successful agencies are going to have that full suite where they can come in and they can do high level strategy, they can look at, even your business development plan in conjunction with the team, your branding, your design, and it will just continue to go in. But it's really hard to do on the Isle of Man because you don't have all those expertise here. So we in the past have partnered with other people because we have always been really transparent that if we can't do it, we'll bring someone else in. And that's actually what our name means. So a fundi in Swahili means like a specialist of your trade. And the idea was, even when we started, was that we'd always build a core team, but there is just no way we can be a specialist at everything in this game. So we'll pull in people for the job. But I think what you'll see now is, especially because employment is such a big thing here and people are recruiting like mad, that a lot of people's budgets are going to be spent very much on that becoming an employer brand. And therefore you have to understand culture and you have to understand that everything that sits around that in order to market the business to attract new people. So you just end up there.
Let's talk about that emotional connection to brands then. Do you know why that exists? An Apple customer, I guess, thinks it's slick. It's there's a trust in it. So if Apple bought out a trainer, you kind of know what that trainer is.
Yeah.
Because you just know, even though you've never seen a pair of Apple trainers, you kind of know what to expect.
Yeah.
I presume that's ultimately the pinnacle of a brand.
Yeah, it's because it's consistency, and like we speak about this all the time. It's the touch point. So every single touch point across Apple is consistent. You open the box, and the suspense of opening an iPhone box is the same sort of suspense that they use when they do a launch of a product. And I think the emotional side of branding is that most people will either have a negative or a positive experience with a brand, and that's where that emotional connection starts. And when I was still in South Africa, I worked closely with Unilever, and they did a study where they took these outlying populations and they asked them to go into store and ask for different products. And these people would go into the store and they would ask for branded products, not toothpaste. They'd ask for Colgate, and not dishwashing soap. They could ask for Sunlight soap. And so people didn't know what they cost or what, they didn't ask for it like, I need dishwashing soap. They asked based on brands. And it's because generationally, those are the brands that we used. And so I think the hardest part is to create a brand that is going to outlive probably everyone in a business. And that is what we're all striving to do, is to have this brand that has affinity, that's not attached to people and it's not attached to anything else that people buy into. But it takes a long time and it takes mistakes. Like, you've got to try a lot of things before you get there. But I think on the Isle of Man, what we're seeing is there is a shift where people are taking branding and marketing a bit more seriously. I think they rode that kind of wave where they were like, well, everyone uses X because they've always done that, to, well, there's a bit more competition. It might be that people are more conscious of cost, or there's so many different factors. So now it becomes, okay, well, it's much more than just I've always used them. But the emotional side of it is how you perceive a brand. And no one, it's like I say, no one wants to see pictures in our game of like, our website is not covered in pictures of websites and, computers because we work on them. No one cares about that. They care about the softer side. So, it's about how do you show the why of the business and then get people to tie into that.
Interesting. So obviously in the time you've been here on the Isle of Man anyway, and certainly with the business, there's an evolution obviously digitally in regard to how's that shifted for your business, because you've ultimately got to embrace new tech.
Yeah.
Not that you wouldn't, but
yeah,
it's shifting from the what it was. It seems only a good thing, because ultimately there's more avenues and more opportunities.
Yeah. It's crazy though, because on one side of the business, and when it comes to like technology, like the development side, it's like AI. It's revolutionary and it helps, the developers, they are more efficient. There's ways that they can clean up their code and do certain things, but it hasn't really cracked the branding side yet. And we're still playing and we're still trying to understand how it can work there. But ever since we started, going back to when Facebook was launched, it was like, Facebook's here. And you were like, oh, you've got to quickly jump on board and figure that out. And then they're like, surprise, there's Instagram. And it's like, oh, surprise, and it's going to just keep going. And I think the hardest thing you have to understand in our game is like which avenues to go down and which avenues to not. And I think it's about knowing that technology is phenomenal, but the basics are still the basics. So it's just about how you can deliver them faster. But I think in our world, especially in like development, the biggest issue we have is like you'll build a website for a client, but 2 years later you'll have to like knock on the door and be like, just so you know, technology's changed massively in those 2 years. So you should be looking at potentially a new site. And that's really hard because it feels like we are constantly saying change, but technology is changing at such a rate that if you don't, you will very quickly be outdated.
I suppose for companies like ours, the value in having an agency is someone's out there looking at the change and trends, coming back, knocking on the door,
Yeah.
saying, keep an eye out.
And it is that challenging thing. I gave someone a piece of advice in South Africa, and I said, if you've chosen an agency that's easy to work with, you've chosen the wrong agency, because they should be challenging you all the time. They should be asking you why. They should, it's like I always say, we don't do pretty pictures. We don't just paint by numbers. We're not someone who, here's a picture, here's some words, put it together. We ask you why. What is the message? Who's it going to? And I know in particular, I've just got a challenging personality when it comes to asking why things happen. and it's more because if we can't explain it around the table, then how are we going to explain it externally? And so I think that's exactly it, is that your agency should be constantly saying, but are you thinking of this? Are you doing that? Are you changing that? And it's not, obviously there's a commercial benefit for them to do it, but 9 times out of 10, it's because they're trying to safeguard you, because your competitor might be having that same conversation.
Just to go back to the culture piece and tying it in, you obviously work together, you create a brand that I think, I guess you ultimately have to love that brand that you create for your client as well. If they're then not doing those other pieces, and I'm not implying you have customers like that, but that not you see that as almost part of the bigger jigsaw, and you can give them this nice shiny tool, but you just let it dust away in the corner. Do you get frustrated from that? Should it ever happen?
I do get frustrated, and it does happen more often than I'd like to admit. And I think it's that element of people thinking it's like launching a website or a brand as a project. It's not a project. It's a long-term investment that you're going to just have to continuously sort of work on. But I think if you'd asked me maybe 3 years ago, I would have said I take it personally, actually, because I invest a lot, I invest time, my whole team invests time in a brand, and then you give everyone the tools and then it falls apart. But what I have realized is that the brands that are going to stand like the test of time, literally, will be the ones that are attentive and say, hey, actually, you're right, we're not doing the best, and you work in collaboration. So it's those long-term partnerships that are much more successful than just a short-term, here's a website, take it or leave it. But I think the bigger issue is that people fall out of love with their brand. And so it's more sometimes about reminding people what their brand means, and making them fall in love with it. Because you get sick of seeing, how many times do you hear, oh, I just, you see your logo everywhere, or you see. So I actually think people get fatigued. So if you're not reinventing it, you get fatigued with something.
I suppose part of the conversation we were having before, which is evolving the brand.
Yeah. And that's so important. It's like people think they have to change a logo. It's not about changing a logo. It's about evolving a brand. It's about taking something and extending it to make it conducive to new platforms, new opportunities, new personalities that come in, and new business areas, new initiatives. And I think it's that you can't be too rigid in your brand. There's a reason someone like the Olympics every 4 years comes out with a new brand guidelines. It's because they're not the same brand they were 4 years ago, but they haven't changed their core, who they are. It's just evolving as and when they need new assets or, new opportunities.
I suppose as the time goes by, the story changes, and so you have to tell the story differently.
Yeah. And also I think it's about the world's changing. So I read a whole story today on GQ. Don't ask me why I was on GQ, but it was about a fashion designer in the US who launched a fashion label and couldn't afford top-tier models. So he asked his friends, normal guys, can you come and be our models? And it just exploded virally because people are like, I want to see a normal guy. I don't always want to see a model. And what it was like, if you can tell your story and find a way to tell your story like authentically, and that then is woven into it. And he was making clothes for normal people, not for models. And it's just been like a massive hit. And it's just that if you can be authentic and your story is evolving, tell it exactly how it should be. Don't try to skin it differently.
So we've lost our modelling jobs, I think, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah. So maybe some personal experiences with brand development, the challenge you have with that, working with clients, and the positive side of it. I assume it must be a very rewarding for a brand to come alive and achieve it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm so passionate about what I do, but I also understand that passion can only take you so far. And I think when I sit in front of people, I try and not overwhelm them with that passion, because I don't think anyone's ever going to feel about a brand or color the way I do. But I think the biggest challenges I've faced is that I think if it's not done in collaboration, which is key to any project, we've had instances before where you've had like one person say, no, don't worry, I don't need to engage the whole business. I can take this on. Like, I'm representative of the business. We went through like a whole branding process, a website process, and then we did the big grand reveal, and everyone went, no. And so then, as an agency, you can really take that personally, but we're only as good as the person we're collaborating with who represents the business. And so I think the best projects I've worked on and the most success we've had is when we've just had really open communication throughout, and we've got in a room and we've challenged one another, and we've, drawn on a whiteboard or drawn on a piece of paper or had these ideas. And it's not always in a meeting. It's, over a glass of wine, or it's, quickly phoning because I've thought of something. So I used to think that was not the way to do business, but now I've realized lean into it, and 9 times out of 10, we become friends with our clients, and it's because we deeply care about that brand and those people. And so you find like that kind of a brand ambassador environment, like we feel like we caretakers of brands, even long after they leave us, there's a care. And I still email clients that have left us, as in like they no longer need our service, and be like, hope you don't mind me emailing, but I saw on your website that this page is not working. I mean, I really shouldn't care, but I do. And so I think that's the challenge, is knowing when to let go a little bit.
I suppose we probably should have caveated that Jess and Afundi were behind the creation of Atlas brand. So it's great that we're on friendly terms, that we're friends on the back of that. But yeah, maybe I wasn't involved in that whole rebrand process. And it would be interesting, I think, for some of our listeners to maybe understand a little bit about what went into it and how we landed on Atlas, and hear it from your side.
I'll only say the good things. No, I'm kidding. It's still one of my favorite projects, and I'm genuinely not saying that because I'm sitting in the building and staring at the brand. But I think the reason I really loved it was because it was really pressured in a lot of ways, because we didn't have a huge amount of time for various business reasons. But there was a lot of different personalities around the table. And obviously you guys were in such a unique position where you had existing businesses with existing brands, and you were coming together to make, a new group. And I think right in the beginning, we were thinking of taking existing names and just, changing them around. And then I think maybe the culture bit dictated that we needed a new name that represented a new phase of the business and, a new opportunity. And naming a business is the worst part of any project, because a name is just so hard to get across the line until you see everything.
It's not that important either,
No. I think it's important to the people that work there, because they're like, oh, I need to say it. I need to go into meetings. I need to write it. But really, people look at a name on black and white on a piece of paper and they're like, oh, what is that? It's a bit like if I said Apple before Apple was Apple, McDonald's, you'd be like, I don't get it. Because everything that sits around it is the look, the feel, the logo, the imagery, the little graphic assets. So there's so much more to it. So I think what I loved about the project was there were so many different nuances with the different businesses, different personalities, but everyone had a really common goal. So there was this desire within the building to create something great. And I think because everyone had that common goal, despite the differences in the history and where everything came, we had a blank canvas in essence. So with the name, we I think Basil not so long ago reminded me of some of the names, and I was like, did we suggest that? But there were a lot of names on the table, and then we ended up obviously on Atla, and Atla is it's from Norse history, and I think that was phenomenal because there is an Isle of Man part of that. So and it was the goddess of the sea, if I'm not mistaken, and the reason that we intertwined like the water and all of that was really to drive home those messages of like simplicity, clarity. We wanted to give clients that sense of like calm. And also internally, we wanted something that people had an affinity towards and had a pride in. And Atla is also nice and short. So there were so many benefits. And I think once everyone saw it, it just felt right. I don't know about from your side, but it really felt right. But then we had to persuade everyone that it was just a name at that point. So then we went around the houses to what does it look like? And so even the logo itself is all the shapes within the actual icon is based on sort of architecture and like Norse design. So again, it's got meaning. So you might not know that when you first look at it, but if you hear the story and if you speak to people in the business, they obviously hopefully would say that. And then it evolved, it's from the colors to the wording to what it looks like internally. And it was a really short project in an essence in terms of start to finish, but it's still going on and we're still working with you to sort of evolve the brand. And I think that's what's so nice is that it doesn't have an end date. It just is something that keeps going. But it was challenging. And especially at the time, I think it was a big change for people internally. So you had to also reinstall pride because people had worked for some businesses for 25 years, 30 years. And now all of a sudden they had a different color, a different look and feel, a different voice. And I just think, hats off to you guys because there was an element of you had to do a lot of the hard work with staff. I don't have to do that work, but I would do it all over again. Not that I want you to rebrand.
Yeah, I think it's interesting on the other side from, I suppose, on the inside. I'm probably more than ever really appreciating the conversation earlier around it can be the nicest looking thing, the nicest or the oddest name in the world. It's none of that's that. Not to dismiss the work. It's got to be right, but it's the culture that surrounds that. And when you see that, whether it's the logo, the shade, the color, you know what your expectation is. And that's for us it's not the harder thing to build, but the thing around. And I do think you mentioned there about attracting talent. I think it's going to be in a market that's difficult. It's going to be a key addition to all the other opportunities and benefits that business can own. So I think it has an intangible value that's at times it's quite hard to quantify.
Yeah, and I think that's one of our struggles is to try and go into a room and ask people to invest in something that you can't necessarily calculate return on investment. Much easier to say, I can build you a website and you want 10 leads. Okay, that's our KPI. Let's achieve that. But much harder to say, hey, we're going to create a brand and it's going to be good for your business for so many different reasons. But, when you're looking at the balance sheet, you can't always figure out where it sits. But it makes a big difference. I mean, we're in the process now of just about to relaunch a charity on the Isle of Man. So don't know if you're familiar with Motivate, but they help with addiction services across, alcohol, drugs, and gaming, gambling, and they do incredible work. And we've worked with them to completely refresh their brand, new look and feel, website, everything. And that's probably one of the most rewarding projects I've been involved in because it's about now not what's good for a business, which obviously has commercial, a reasoning behind a rebrand a lot of the time. This is because they just really want to affect change in people's lives. And to be involved in something where you've got to look at what would the business, and I call it a business, what would the charity, how can they position themselves that they're accessible to people? And it's been one of the biggest challenges because it feels like I have a big weight on my shoulder, and the team have a really big weight on your shoulder, because you're trying to make a charity look like, hey, come and talk to us and we can help you. And I've loved it because it's kind of stripped out the nonsense that comes sometimes with doing an exercise like this. It's all about like what would make people want to pick up the phone or open the door or believe that we can help. And so for me, that project is just, that's what I live for. And those are the projects that don't come around so often, but have been super rewarding. And it's almost like a personal thing that I've taken huge pride in.
And for entrepreneurs out there and leaders, and we did a panel discussion a few weeks ago, so now I can throw the question back. What would the advice be to people aspiring either to be entrepreneurs, start their own business, lead?
I think it would be to know when to slow down and when to speed up. I think the thing we've really learned is we were busy from almost day one, which was an incredible blessing, and no regrets on that. But we've done things sometimes a little bit sort of backwards, in the sense that we've been really busy, and then we're like halfway down the road, we're like, oh, is there a good process for that? Have we documented that? And so we've spent like the last year and a half particularly going back and making sure that everything to do with our process and how we conduct business, how we engage with clients, the systems that we have are top level. But we've kind of done it backwards, where I think knowing when to say, actually, I need to take a step back, not just consume myself with day-to-day business, and have a look at everything and make sure that the fundamentals are there is really important.
That must be generally hard though, certainly in a startup where they've got to put bread on the table as well.
Yeah, it is a balance. And I think it's a struggle also to look at, and we're a service-driven business in the sense that we sell time. So you look at an 8-hour day and you say, okay, well, if I'm taking 2 hours to look at processes, that's not the best use of time, but it's so fundamental to the success of client relationships and the success of the agency, and even for our staff, to make sure that the business, I hate the word, but a lot of agencies sort of do that around the kitchen table, where it's, I think if you look behind the hood or under the hood of an agency, Lyle will probably be able to attest, having engaged with agencies so often, is it's a scary world. It can be chaos. And we're trying to operate like in a non-chaos way. And I think it's just about knowing that sometimes to slow down and maybe make some sacrifices or risk it and say, I'm not going to just take on every piece of business, but I'm going to be more selective and I'm going to work on our own business. I mean, we've just recently, and I don't mind saying, is we've engaged with a partner to help us with our own branding and marketing, which sounds absolutely wild, but it's because I spend all my day thinking of how to market other people that I was struggling to sit back and say what's best for Fundi. And I think to do that, it's like giving your firstborn away, but it's the best decision for the business. So make a decision that is going to help you be able to service your clients better. And that was getting external resource, even in a game that we could do for ourselves.
That's not dissimilar, though, I guess, to a leader in a business getting a coach, just acknowledging that they've got but you can always be better. So, and a fresh perspective, I guess, for you guys as well.
100%.
It's ultimately going to filter down and give value to your customers at the end of the day.
And we are a married couple, so you've also got to have that swing vote in the nicest possible way. But yeah, it's refreshing. And I think I'm not against the fact that our brand needs to always be evolving. And when you're in it, it's really hard to see that. And I think I've read so many case studies of even big agencies who outsource, like, from a strategic point of view, outsource all of that because you get too bogged down in the detail and you can't really see it all. But I think it's also to back yourself. I mean, Nick and we spent a lot of that first year being like, yeah, we can definitely do that. And then taking a deep breath and saying, okay, we got to figure this out. And I just think it's that tenacity that if you've got it and you're willing to work hard, then it's phenomenal.
Great. Thanks for your time, Jess.
Only a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lyle.
Pleasure. Great to be on the podcast. And thank you, Jess. Thank you for your continued kind of passion for our brand as well.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks for listening, everyone. It's a word out from Martin and word out from
Lyle.